Welcome to another episode of Hearing God in Scripture, where we dive into the Bible and learn to hear from God. Make sure to like, subscribe, because it helps us out, and comment. Let us know how we're doing and all the things. Now for today, what do we have?
You are on the hook today.
I'm on the hook today.
You
okay,
are.
Let's do it.
Because I told you the other day, yesterday, day before, whatever, I said, look at this interesting passage.
Yep.
So, and you looked and you commented and wrote me back. So now Austin has to take a look at this passage. And so you know what you know which passage it is. And two, you have an idea about the topics.
Exodus 16.
Right. I told my wife we were going to do this, and she's like, oh, that's good. Because the point is not just for me to say this is what it is, but to get you to learn to wrestle through it and to hear God in there. And
well, I got to remember now what I said to you.
Right. My phone's over there.
I have my phone too. But it's funny because I am in another passage and I read it last night. I'm not going to tell you because I think we should do it.
Okay.
And I was reading it last night and I had just posted the short. I don't know if you saw it because I'm the one that does all the social media, but
Right.
It was, you don't have to worry about the meaningful, just let God speak.
Oh,
And that was like the theme. And when I read it last night, I was like, okay, I'm not really seeing anything right now.
in that passage.
In the passage, right? And so then I went to bed, woke up, and I was all of a sudden it popped into my head as I was thinking about it after I did my workout and I'm taking a shower. And I was like, oh, that's how we're supposed to be to God. And started thinking about it, and it was cool. I had the relax and sit on it,
Right.
epiphany moment,
Right,
and
right.
it was exciting.
And you work with it, and you know, you're not in a hurry, and just wait for it. And
So I'm excited to go back
good.
and read again.
Right.
a little
And you
bit slower.
learn to do that. You learn that process. You know, once you do it, then you do it better and you do it better. My wife always says, yeah, but you do that so quick, you don't even know you're taking these steps. So
It's true.
it's like, oh, yeah.
After how many years?
Right. But we are looking at Exodus chapter 16. So, you know, we're going to read essentially 31 through 36. And the verse which I think is central, at least the one I'm going to look at, maybe I should let you figure that out because I wrote it to you and said, this is an amazing passage. You got to read this one.
So you said 36?
31 through 36. But the
31 through
passage that really is maybe the best verse that I'm looking at is 33.
Okay.
Says, and Moses said to Aaron, take a jar and put an omer of manna in it and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations.
So when I read it on a different version, but let's start in 31
Okay.
and then so the listeners have the verse and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt. So Moses said to Aaron, take a jar and put an omer of bread of manna in it. Then place it before the Lord Lord, to be kept for the generations to come. As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna with the tablets of the covenant law so that it might be preserved. The Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a land that was settled. They ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. And then 36 says, an omer is a tenth of an ephah.
Ephah. Right.
Ephah.
Whatever. Usually how we say it. And who knows? You might be right.
Well, first thing,
Yeah.
as I approach this again,
Right.
how many times it says what the Lord commanded.
Right.
Yeah. He repeats it
Why?
almost 3 times, right?
Right. Why?
I'm not sure yet.
Because you could say it once. I mean,
Well, it's emphasizing, right? Like we've talked about before, where
Right.
when Scripture says things multiple times, it's emphasizing it.
Right. And it brings you back, and you're like,
and it's telling the story of God told Moses when Moses was away with
Right.
God, and now Moses is telling Aaron, and then Aaron goes and tells the Israelites.
right.
So yeah, that's interesting.
And maybe the better verse actually was probably 32, where Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let no more." The first time he says it. But then you say, okay, why is this? What makes this significant? What stands out? Why? Like I said, you got to read this part. It's great.
So as I read it, I'm remembering some of the things.
Good.
And what stood out to me was when you look back at what had previously happened, they disobeyed and tried to keep some till the next day.
Right.
And the Lord said, it's going to go bad. Don't do that. You don't need it.
Right.
I'm giving you enough, right? The Lord basically said, I'm giving you enough. I'm giving you all you need. Then don't go out on the Sabbath. I'm giving you enough. That's all. This is all you need. What did they do? They went out on the Sabbath. They disobeyed again.
Right.
And now the Lord's taking some away.
Not of
taking
every
them
group.
away, but he's
not of a tenth of every ephah that they have. They just make this one bottle.
Oh, I didn't catch that. It seemed like it was maybe something that was going to continue to happen. And the way I saw it was the Lord is saying, look, I can give you, or you can live on even less. You just have to trust me.
Right.
That was what I got out of it.
In this case, what it's saying is, I want you to take this bottle of manna, this, what's it called, an Omer, this container, a tenth of an ephah, this Omer of manna, and I want you to put that, and he says with the testimonies, all that stuff, we'll find later, that they end up having that put into the Ark of the Covenant. It ends up being in there with the tablets.
Oh, okay.
And Aaron's rod. Long story. We don't have to go there. But those are the
future,
things.
right?
Right. So that, why?
So that they can remember.
Right. And what are they remembering?
God providing.
What a huge issue.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we've just come to these things. It's almost like, this is why I said this is such a big issue, because we are forgetful.
Yeah.
We come together to remember. One of the reasons I love to take communion every week, most churches don't, and my current one doesn't, all that kind of stuff. But I love it because it's not just something we go through. It's a remembrance. It's a reminder. This is why I'm gathering together. This is what I live for. This is the one who died for me, Jesus, I remember that. But I can also go back. Well, I don't want to go there. I want to let you push through this passage a little bit.
Well, it's taking something and doing something. It's an act of remembrance, right? It's not just looking back on. It's an act of remembering.
Right, and it's an act of something important. That one of their lessons, one of the things they needed to know and needed to learn, and so they take this important time. I remember when, relate to you a little bit, when we first dropped our daughter Tess off, your wife, at Biola.
In college, yeah.
Right. Emotional time, I was a mess, and we had this, Biola's just, they're dishonest people. They took advantage of us. When they did this worship service, and I'm just bawling like a baby there. It was great.
I was like, how did they take advantage? But doing a worship service when you dropped her off, got it.
And so, but on the way out, we took communion together, and then on the way out, I grabbed a little stone. I still have it.
Oh,
just picked up a little stone, and you see that in different places, and that's a kind of remembrance. But think of the important things. Somebody's calling me tomorrow to talk about my grandfather, because she's doing a report on this. Happens to be about my grandfather. And,
interesting.
And Aubrey Rodriguez.
Oh, okay.
But she's calling me, and but I can, I know some stories, and I know my stories most. Like when my grandfather was in the hospital, and we went and visited him in Chicago. We had just got back from Iran a long time ago, and he was in the hospital, and I ended up being in the room alone with him. Everybody had to go back down. They were coming back up later, and so my grandfather took me aside and told me the stories about when he grew up, and he said. I'm going to tell you the stories because they're important and they're remembrance parts. And that's my reason for telling them. But he says, when I was a kid, I did everything for money. So I used to go down to the fish docks and when the boats came in and they would bring their fish to market, and I'd grab a basket and they would drop a fish and I'd pick it up, put it in my basket, and I'd pick this one up, put it in my basket. And then when I got to market, I'd sell it,
Yeah.
And then my brother, he didn't like to do chores. So I would do the chores for him. He'd pay me. So when I was young, I did everything for money. And then God got a hold of me. I do everything for God. And but it's
powerful.
It's just a story where he took me and told me as a little, what was I, 11 maybe, 10, 11. And, but powerful remembrances and things like that. But these guys took something aside and put it and says, we want to never forget this. So that all those lessons that are tied to this, right? I mean, that's a big thing because for example, you just mentioned some of the lessons beforehand that they didn't trust God and all that stuff, but he's teaching them, and they want to tell the generations in the future.
Trust the Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
God
The Lord
gave
provides.
us. And it even says, the people of Israel ate manna, verse 35, ate the manna 40 years till they came to a habitable land, till they came to their promised land, right? And the manna came right up until they got there. Now, you can find manna in the wilderness, I think. My understanding of manna is it's there. But how it showed up and how often and how regular, only except for on the Sabbath, of course you see this stuff. And then it stops the moment they get to the promised land.
I also see what we've talked about before is, the importance of passing these things on to the generations. I mean, you've said it to me multiple times, right? It's not about just what God's done. It's about what God has done for you.
Right.
Right. And the stories of God are great, but what has God done in your life?
Right.
Pass that on to your kid.
And they're saying, I'm keeping this important lesson, which, by the way, it's important for us. They had an Omer of manna, which means we ought to remember manna. Think about what Jesus says, in the New Testament. Man does not live by bread alone. He's touching on some of these themes.
That's interesting.
But it comes back to a people who remembered that God provided their daily bread.
Yeah.
Give us this day our daily bread, right? So they're learning lessons. They're learning that God is this way, and they're passing that on generation to generation. How important that is.
Yeah.
Now we have this social media and everything else, which is part of. But, it's so people go on there and they can get new information. Well, passing on the old information is huge. What you know to be true, what you experienced from God. Consider what your son is going to need to know. Not only how to sleep, but, how to talk to people, how to care for people, how to then relate to God. I pray over him all the time.
Thank you.
And like, God, you show him yourself early. You make yourself clear to him, and you come and make him alive, and then show him these things and tell him stories and show him something that happened to you like this.
Yeah.
Tell him about manna. And that he begins, and you tell it so that you say, this happened. I was just talking to my class. I had class just before I came over to do this podcast. And we were talking about, in this case, it was in the beginning of Samuel. I'm going through the Old Testament. And there's three things that we talk about it. That we look at the book as historical, literary, and theological.
Okay.
So literary means it's written in a way that you should pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Look at how it's written and why it's written in this order, and they arranged it, and they were very careful with this. So it's masterful and amazing. It's theological. It's giving us lessons about God, and it's historical. It happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we read Samuel, we read about David, we read about Samuel, we read about Saul, we read about these events that happened in history, and they're not just stories, they're events, and we remember them. They're told in particular ways, absolutely, but they're still events.
Yeah.
And this Omer of manna, you say, God did that. If he did that, now we take it into today's world. An Omer of manna, now we say, and they told us to remember this. And they kept it aside with the testimony, with the covenant laws, which they're pointing to later, you know, that are going to happen in a couple chapters, and in Moses and Aaron's rod, you know. But they're saying this is such an important issue. How do we remember that? I think, you know, what attracted me so much about this was I got to remember those important lessons. I need to know them well too. Because the Israelites struggled with them, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we always talk about it, right? You get distracted, you move on, and yeah, how do you remember those key moments when God speaks?
Do you remember a time when God did something really big for you? Just grabbed your attention. You have to think about it, but you go back to a time when he grabbed your attention. Maybe it was a short thing. Maybe it was just, you know, some morning when you had your motorcycle accident. Maybe that one was, you know, when that happened and that it shook you up.
Oh, yeah.
Get your attention. But after a few weeks, you know, you're like, oh, I forgot. You know, you sort of move away from it. And unless you're reminded.
I am, even today, working out. I'm thankful I can still do it.
Yeah.
I'm
but
kind of
sometimes
reminded all the time.
Right. When we get to the place where we move away from our deep gratitude and our understanding,
Yeah.
and that's some of the things that these guys are putting this piece of manna in front of you, and it gives us a chance not just to say, "Oh, that was kind of a cool story." No, let's reflect on it. Let's go back and say, "Well, God, what were you saying there? What did you say to these people? Remember how they complained and grumbled?" And you think about it. I mean, it's easy to say, boy, God just led them through the Red Sea, and now they're grumbling about getting water and then food. Well, they're thirsty.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
I complain when I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's convicting to me because I say, am I trusting God like I ought to? Am I, you know, and then they talk about food and that they were hungry, and they're like, oh, you know, are we gonna have food? And you forget that is the kind of thing that God brings us back to and says, I want you to learn to trust me. I'm putting this manna in front of you so that you don't just trust yourself.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we do. We go to our jobs and we work our things and we make our own money. What's Bart Simpson once said? Not Bart's the little guy, right?
No, I don't know. I never watched
Homer.
The
Yeah,
Simpsons.
Bart. But I know I don't either. But I heard him say once, says, God, we went to work and we made the money and we bought the food. So thanks for nothing.
Interesting.
You know, but we wouldn't be so crass as to say something like that as Bart does. But we sometimes think that way.
Well, I think God has continuously reminded me that He'll provide, because I'm now on number 3 jobs shutting down on me while I'm working there. And each time it's the same thing. The Lord
You're
goes,
you're the common denominator.
Yeah, I am. No, the last one hasn't shut down yet. I left before it did.
No, okay.
I think it's on its way. But He always provides, right? And it's almost forced me to go get a new job, which I then find something else. God provides. I make significantly more than what I would have had I stayed, because you always make more money when you transfer, right? And Yeah, it's now it's like jobs will come and go. God doesn't leave.
Right.
He'll provide.
I had a friend once who said, it's easy to trust God when your bank account's full.
Yes.
But I disagree with that profoundly.
Oh, do tell.
Well, you think you're trusting God when your bank account's full. And you're really trusting your bank account.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, I'm glad that my bank account's full so I can trust you.
Yes.
Instead of saying, wait, what if I lean on God? What if I, even though I have a bank account, I say, God, I'm yours. And I really want to turn my eyes and my thoughts and my focus to you. I mean, think about what the manna's there for. Not just, that it's teaching us to give us this day our daily bread. It's a fascinating thing and God provides different things at different times. He provided manna when they're in the wilderness going across in this tough time and they needed God to provide it. Well, that provides a lot of context for us to apply this. It may be in a tough time relationally, maybe in a tough time financially, maybe in a tough time emotionally. I don't know, whatever situation where you say, well, what are you saying to me now? God, what are you saying to me now? And yet God says, and when he does something, especially something as significant as manna, and you see it, that God has provided, maybe it's a great plan to say, we're going to take this and save a little or do something with it so that it's in front of us, that we don't forget.
Yeah.
And we pass it on. It's not particularly for this generation. It's for future generations that need to learn the lessons that we learned.
Yeah.
Need to learn that God is faithful, that he's good, that he walks with us, that he provides in different ways for different times, and yet he still provides.
I know myself, I get caught up in Lord provides, it's always about money, right? And things. But it's not always what we need. So I feel like we need to be open to really see what the Lord's doing and not just looking at the things or the money when it comes to providing. Is he providing me emotional support, right? Is he changing?
Is he giving you purpose?
Providing purpose, yeah.
Is he giving you something, a kingdom to be working toward,
motivation for something.
Right? Other things like that.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be, ooh, I had this bill come through and, I had a check come in, right?
Right.
It doesn't always have to be
I bought a new Ferrari. Right. And and that it's not what he's doing in the wilderness is he's taking a people and providing for them and showing them himself. And the first generation dies off. I could talk about it, but in this passage, he's showing them himself and he's shaping a people to be a kingdom and priests. In fact, I had a student call me today to talk about their paper, and they were talking about 2 chapters after this, and I thought, I'm almost there. Chapter 19 or 3 chapters after this
in Exodus.
Yeah.
Okay.
And where it talks about he's shaping him into a kingdom of priests. It's the passage that's sort of quoted or in 1 Peter, I believe it is, but that they're a kingdom of priests. And he says, I want to talk about this topic, and it's fascinating because he's shaping this people with things like providing manna to teach them to become a people who depend upon God, who look to God, who lean upon God. And that's our best life.
Yep.
We get lied to about this material world being the most important thing, but the spiritual world, trusting in God, and he can take care of everything. How he does it, the way he does it, I don't know. But that he does it.
Yep.
That's a different issue. To those who fear him and trust him. So save a bottle of something important so that you can pass on the lessons from generation to generation. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. See you on the next one.